Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back another video from the salad bar. So I really enjoyed the which MCs could survive the Hunter exam from Hunter x Hunter, and now we are checking out which MCs can pass My Hero Academia's hero course. So I gotta say, if we're looking at all these, this has gone a second in, that I don't see why majority of them couldn't. you know, but it's like 38 minutes long, so I think he's going more in depth with the discussion and the analysis and whatnot. I think that's what he said he would do in the last one. He said if people liked it, then more of an in-depth discussion as to why and stuff. So it's cool. So by the looks of it, like we got gone from Hunter x Hunter, we got Giorno, Luffy, Mob, Goku, Ichigo. Yeah. So let's get into this. Love me some crossverse.
Let's take a couple iconic shonen MCs and put them into My Hero Academia.
Okay.
Who has what it takes to become a pro hero? And how successful would they actually be as heroes?
I don't see what it... okay. Depends what we mean here.
Based on some suggestions, I have a handful of characters here. This video will be kind of similar to my JoJo's and JJK video and the Hunter exam video. We'll be giving each of these characters unique and fitting quirks, as well as seeing if they have what it takes to pass all the challenges they may face. By the way, this is not a power scaling video. In the Hunter exam video, I kind of focus on that a little too much, but here, it's irrelevant. We're essentially making new powers and stories for all the characters here anyways. This will be about their mentality, what quirks they'd have, how they'd use them, and things like that. We also might give them support items if it fits. My Hero Academia makes it very clear that you can't be a great hero just with amazing power alone. There's way more to it than just that. We'll be looking at how all these characters handle the entrance exam, sports festival, internships, final exams, licensing, and the work study. We'll also grade them with the same stats My Hero Academia uses: power, speed, technique, intelligence, and cooperativeness. These
right?
Stats are rated 1 to 5, with some characters getting a 6 for those with exceptional circumstances. Like All Might, for example, has a 6 for power. Plus, we'll cover each character's motivation for being a hero and who their primary mentor or role model may be. For this roster, I took characters that are at least close to Deku's age, since they're enrolling in UA. They're not exactly the same, but they're going to be close enough.
Similar,
We'll assume they're all starting at square one and just entering UA. And there will be some manga spoilers in regards to each of the characters' powers. Not for all of them, just some of them.
Okay.
Here's who we have: Yuji Itadori, Asta, Giorno Giovanna, Gon Freaks, Goku, Ichigo, Edward Elric, Mob, and Luffy before he set sail. Also, we have one surprise at the end. Someone not grouped in with these people.
Who's the surprise?
A lot of people requested Naruto in the last video, but I still have not read that series. And yeah, I know how crazy that is. I guess that's kind of a running joke in my videos at this point, but yeah, I can't cover him here since I know nothing about him.
That's mental. What the way? Oh my god.
All of them will have their personalities based on their first chapter's appearance, and again, we're going to assume they're starting high school like Deku. With some characters like Gon or Goku, for example, we have to adjust their age a bit. But keep that all in mind because I won't outwardly mention all of this later on. Just assume they're basically starting in the same place as Deku.
Okay.
And I know this is a long intro, but one more thing. For the sake of simplicity, any trials that they go through here are the same ones Deku went through. So the test, the sports festival trials, and everything else, those are the same.
You've mentioned
However, keep in mind they won't be encountering any of the villains that Deku encounters. This will just be seeing if they can pass the standard curriculum.
Okay.
If we included stuff like Stain, the Hideout Raid, anything like that, that pretty much delves into what if fanfic territory, which is too subjective and nuanced.
We get it.
I know we kind of already are in that territory, but with the regular curriculum, we're at least somewhat grounded and objective.
So it's just
First,
the
we'll
test.
start with Yuji. Following the death of his grandfather, he's motivated to enroll at UA. His quirk is called Shrine. You see what I mean about the powers? Yuji obviously didn't have this right away. But this is the type of things we'll do for quirks in this.
The ability to cut or ignite food, currently only having the cutting portion. Okay.
Video. Anyways, Yuji's quirk deals with food preparation. He can cut things or ignite them. Currently, he mostly works with the slicing parts, but hopes to get better use of the flames one day.
Alright.
Also, he's pretty strong physically.
This adds to it a little bit as well. Like how he adds the little hypotheticals on top of everything. That's cool.
As of writing, Yuji only just started using Shrine, but it's safe to assume it functions just like Sukuna's version of it, so his quirk will be like that here. And for future characters, this is the type of spoilers I'm talking about. We're not really going beyond this, we're just discussing actual powers.
I was going to say, that's quite far in. And quite spoilery. I mean, I'm up to date, that's fine, but Jesus.
Anyways, let's rate Yuji.
Like, mention the spoiler beforehand. Oh my god.
Is at a 5 out of 5. Speed, 5 out of 5.
Okay.
Technique, 4 out of 5. Intelligence, 3 out of 5. Pretty standard. Cooperativeness, 4 out of 5. Pretty good stats all around.
Pretty rounded.
His most notable stats are obviously his physical power. For motivation, he wants to ensure everyone around him can have a proper death, and he also wants to find a fulfilling purpose in life. To achieve both of those, the best thing he could do is become a hero. For the entrance exam, the written test is probably going to be the hardest part for Yuji. He's not great academically, but we don't necessarily know the full contents of the written test, and I feel like he'd be fine here, even though he's a below-average student. As for the physical test, he'll be perfectly fine there.
Yeah, physical
The only
test,
issue would be him
definitely.
trying to apply Shrine, but of course that would be good against the robots here. And who knows, he might actually pick up some rescue points along the way for helping people. His quirk is actually pretty great for this. Imagine him using it to save someone under rubble or things like that. Yuji might also have a similar predicament to Shinzo, where he feels his quirk is that of a villain's. I mean, just look at it. You know who it's from.
Yeah.
Now onto the sports festival. By now, Yuji probably has more experience with his quirk. Maybe he's not a master of it here. This is something that's really hard to practice with after all. And he'd probably mostly be focused on the slashes because that's the main part of it. He could use it on the environment around him, send non-lethal slashes through the air, or use it to nullify attacks somehow. The first few events won't really be too big of an issue for him, like he'd probably finish first place in the run, which means he'd be a big target in the cavalry battle. Applying his quirk here would be pretty tough, but at least he would cooperate with whoever is on his team. Although, given the fact that he has the most points, it would be hard to find a good team. He could even use his quirk from a distance to cut off the headbands people are holding. For the tournament, though, he could at least make use of his
Jesus Christ, I thought he was about to get dead violent.
environment, but like cutting up the arena and using the rubble to help him. Although, given how lethal his quirk is, he might hold back here in the actual
Just
fight.
in case.
But he's physically strong at least. I could see him making it pretty far. As for the internship, a good performance in the festival means good offers for an internship. I'm not really too sure which hero would be the best for him. Maybe Edshot could help here, for example. Part of his quirk involves using himself as a sharp weapon after all. Or maybe even
Help
someone
him
like Crust or
tone
Fat
it.
Gum. A shield needs a sword after all.
Just.
Especially with someone like Fat Gum, if he's with Kirishima, that would be perfect. For the final exams, cooperation is obviously key here, and Yuji would be pretty fine in that regard. It all depends who his partner is and which hero he's up against, but now he'd likely have some sort of application of his quirk that could help in situations like this. Plus, his persistence would make it really hard to stop him. I feel he'd be fine here. For licensing, this also wouldn't really be a big issue. Of course, he has great offensive capabilities, but for rescue, his quirk is perfect. Plus, there's the aspect of Yuji already wanting to save people. For the work study, now that he has more knowledge of his quirk, particularly the fire part of it, he could still go with the heroes that I mentioned before. His fire isn't like the Todoroki families, but maybe even Endeavor could help him find other ways to make his fire arrow work, alongside his slashes. It's a really powerful part of his quirk, but if it works just like it does in JJK, collateral damage will be a huge issue. Obviously, he doesn't have the domain expansion nuke like Sukuna, so it's not like he's going to be doing that, but still, he has to worry about collateral damage regardless. Besides the other
Yeah, it's like learning to tone it down. I don't want to kill people, I'm sorry, but it happened again.
heroes I mentioned, maybe a fitting mentor for him would be someone like Sir Night-Eye or maybe Aizawa. I'm thinking of someone who would have an influence on him similar to Nanami. Of course, he can't do his internships or work studies with Aizawa, but Night-Eye is an option. He's someone who's serious but dependable. He'd be a pretty good stand-in for Nanami here. Overall, he'd be decently successful as a hero. His mental state and his physical stats are perfect for this. His biggest issue would be finding an application for his quirk, and getting over the idea that his quirk is that of a villain's. Next on to Asta.
This is going to be a bit different. Intelligence isn't going to be up there.
He of course shares some similarities with Deku already, both in terms of motivation and somewhat in how his power works.
Going to be the Wizard King.
He would of course strive to be a hero here too. Just replace his goal of Wizard King
So he's read Black Clover, but he's not read Naruto. That's so bizarre.
with that of being the #1 pro hero. For his quirk, at first he's seemingly quirkless. Like Deku, he thought he would be stuck as quirkless forever. However, he's trained rigorously in order to grow physically, and it turns out he actually does have a quirk. The reason he never realized this is because of how particular his quirk is. It's simply called anti-quirk. He generates a strange power that
The ability to coat objects with an energy that, when in contact, stops quirks unless it dissipates. That's an interesting application. Alright, cool. So, he has an energy he creates, and then he throws it onto someone and it stops their quirk from working. You've made Asta really freaking OP here.
can coat other objects, and when someone comes in contact with it, their quirk stops working until the energy fully dissipates. He'll probably have a couple different support items too. For example, he's a skilled sword fighter, but he won't really be using that too much here because he's not going to be killing opponents.
Yeah.
Although in training, it's good to work with different weapons.
Maybe like a wooden sword or something?
He'll have something non-lethal like a bat. And given the nature of how his power works as a quirk here, why not give him some projectile
Non-lethal, and you show a steel baseball bat. Alright.
so he could throw that energy? Or maybe even a scarf like Aizawa's, which could be used for capture and eliminating a quirk. For his motivation, of course he developed his quirk very late, and never even realized he had one in the first place. To compensate, he focused all on raw power and trained himself to his limits.
Very strong.
It's pretty obvious who his mentor would be here, Aizawa. Even though their quirks work differently, Obviously, they both focus on stopping other quirks. For power, he's easily at 5 out of 5.
Yeah.
Same for speed.
Okay.
For technique, we'll put him at 4 out of 5. Intelligence, probably 2 out of 5. I
Okay.
don't imagine him being very book smart here, even though he's definitely battle smart. And finally, a 4 out of 5 for cooperativeness.
I don't see why
Very
it
great
wouldn't
stats
be
all
very,
around.
yeah, okay.
Now onto the entrance exam. If Deku could make it, I think Asta could
Yeah,
too.
fair.
From the very beginning, he's shown absurd resilience and power. Not to mention, he doesn't back down protecting others. He might even get rescue points at the very least, if he doesn't figure out how to destroy any of the bots, which, even with his great power, would be pretty tough. His quirk here can't really do too much in the exam. Honestly, this might be the toughest part for him. The written exam wouldn't be his strong suit, and his quirk isn't really suited for the physical part of the exam. It would be really hard, but I think he can pull through. The sports festival will be a cakewalk for him, though. The obstacle race would be really easy for him to pull off. His quirk will also be really good for the cavalry battle, especially if he coats his energy around the headband so it eliminates quirks when people try and take the headband
Oh my god. Wow.
from him. And as for the tournament part, I feel like he could even win this. His biggest issue is the fact that he needs to be up close to someone for his quirk to work, unless he uses a projectile with his energy as part of it. But think about how stacked this is in his favor. He'll turn off other quirks, and then he could use his raw power to win.
Yeah, you've made him so freaking OP within the world of My Hero Academia just by making up a quirk for him. This is crazy.
And with how strong he is to begin with, at that point it should be pretty easy. Which means for the internship, he'll probably get a lot of offers. I can't think of a particular hero that he'd work with here. Mirko might be a good idea because he'd have to rely a lot on his fighting skills, and she could really help with that too.
Yeah, that's a good shout.
But again, I'm not really sure who to place him with. If Aizawa were doing internships, I'd definitely say him.
Well, yeah, because it's the same aspect. He can teach him how to do all the stuff he does whilst nullifying people's ability. In fact, is this more OP than in reality, isn't it? Although he does need to make no, Astus is more OP. He needs to make eye contact with them to nullify their quirk, doesn't it? Whereas Asta here can just throw an energy thing over them and it's gone. That's more OP than Aizawa's. So he just needs to teach him all the other stuff he does in between.
The final exam should
Is it more OP? Yeah.
be an easy pass for him, especially given his cooperation. And from here on out, it should be
That's giving him something that he doesn't even...
much easier. I don't see any issues for licensing, especially with his design.
Although, no, it does make sense, because in the world, I keep going on at this, it's just interesting, because in Black Clover, his whole thing is he nullifies magic within it, so it still does match what he would do, but it still seems really, because he's not even that OP with it, people can still use,
to save people, and just a kind of heroic nature in general. And for the work study, he already has a pretty good resume. So even though I don't have a solid idea of what agency he'd work with, he should be fine here.
Okay.
And even though his internship and work study won't be with Aizawa, he definitely would be a mentor for Asta. I'm sure he'd take a liking to him. Overall, he has what it takes to be a hero. The biggest
Does he have to have eye contact?
hurdle is the first step. But as he learns about his power more and grows with it, and even figures out what type of support items to use, I could see him being really successful with this. Next, Giorno.
Giorno
His quirk is
Giovanni.
pretty straightforward.
Gold
It's called Gold Experience.
There we go, I was waiting for it to spell out. The ability to manipulate life. I thought it said PS5 there. Works exactly as in Part 5, excluding Requiem, so we've not got Requiem. Okay.
He can manipulate life, and the quirk works pretty much like how his stand works in Part 5.
What a very out there phrasing. The ability to manipulate life.
Not Requiem, just regular Gold Experience. For power, he's at a 2 out of 5. For speed, 3 out of 5. Technique, 5 out of 5. Intelligence, 5 out of 5. Cooperativeness, 3 out of 5.
Okay. Power I agree with. Speed okay. Very smart, so alright. Yeah, because I suppose from the beginning he works on his own, doesn't he? And then it takes... Yeah.
He likes to do his own thing a lot,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
with the right group he can cooperate really well.
Okay,
Again, since we're basing this off of how he was in the beginning, he very much looks out for himself. But his growth potential is there. Physically he might not seem like much, but his intellect and technique really help him in any sort of battle. But he's not going to be a pro hero here. For his motivation, he's an orphan that lived close to the underworld. He takes a different route from everyone
the
else.
overhaul
aiming to be a
organization,
mobster.
love that.
There are people in particular that he admires, but mostly he views them as a bad thing, especially when he finds out some of the stuff that's going on, mainly what Overhaul's doing, because this is the group he's part of. He's not going to be a pro hero. He's going to take Overhaul's place. Ironically enough,
Right.
Overhaul might find his quirk appealing due to the similar nature of it, especially when it comes to his test on Eri. The two would definitely be using each other in the long run, but I would think Giorno could forge his own path through and defeat Overhaul at some point, taking over the organization. if not at least helping it fall apart.
But that's not what
His
we're
quirk would
focusing
also
on. We're
perfectly counter
focusing on the
overhaul.
test.
It's really strange, like every part of his backstory, personality, and motivations fit perfectly with him being in this organization, even his power too. If he hypothetically did want to become a hero, in short, I think his conviction and intelligence would carry him through, although this path for him feels way more fitting. At least at first, he wouldn't desire to become a hero. Next, we have Gon. His quirk is also pretty straightforward. We'll just call it Enhancer.
Enhancer. Works akin to his Nen. Rock boosts punches paper. Ranged attacks scissors. Sword go brr. Okay.
And usually for a support item, he carries a fishing pole. It's just a normal fishing pole, nothing
Intelligence isn't going to be very high on this at all.
crazy about it. His quirk works essentially like how his Nen works in Hunter x Hunter. And there's 3 attacks he relies on a lot. He can boost punches with rock, he can launch a ranged attack with paper, and he can make a sword with scissors. There are other things he could do, but those are his 3 signature moves. For his power, 6 out of 5. He's strong
Yo.
to begin with, and his quirk makes him even stronger.
From the beginning. I thought we were doing like from chapter 1. I'm so confused in how this works now. Thought we were going from like chapter 1. And then you're just going, because he can't even use Nen at the beginning, and now you're saying his power is 6 out of 5. What? I'm so confused.
Speed, 5 out of 5.
Okay, I give him that.
Again, very physically impressive. Technique, 3 out of 5.
How? Alright,
Maybe even 4. Intelligence, 2 out of 5.
I agree with that.
But if we're talking street smarts and survival skills, 6 out of 5. For cooperativeness,
Why? Alright,
4 out of 5.
okay. That power, 6 out of 5, is bothering me, because he said from chapter 1, and we've done chapter 1 with everyone else, so like Asta's got his anti-magic, so he's got that. We've gone with... Because if this is the case... if this is the case, and Gon's got Nen, why doesn't Yuta have Sukuna?
He's quite charismatic and outgoing, but his impulsive side and anger can make him act rash and make him act on his own. The entrance exam would be a pretty simple pass here. Knowing Gon, he'd
Yeah, 'cause
probably
he can
help
use
people
Nen.
out without even realizing he should be doing that. Even if he doesn't, the obstacles would be no problem. His fishing pole gives extra mobility as well, and the written test might be an issue for him, knowing his
Yeah.
lack of book smarts. But again, we don't really know what that test entails. At least for the physical test, he'd be more than okay. For the sports festival, I mean, just look at Hunter x Hunter. This is nothing he didn't already see in the Hunter exam. Of course, this is a different version of Gon, and he hasn't experienced the Hunter exam. But point being, for the character he's based on, he should be fine. An endurance test, a team test, and a tournament. That's going to be no issue. He'd probably even go pretty far in the tournament, maybe even winning it all. And if these students were all together, him and Asta would be a really interesting matchup. Even if Asta cancels out his quirk, it's raw power versus raw power. And with a good sports festival performance, he'd get a good internship. Maybe Best Genius would take him in, and Gon would go for it because of his high rank.
Yeah, maybe.
It would be for the same reasons he took Bakugo in. Maybe just to make him more cordial. Fat Gum could be a good option too. They could definitely work well together because of Fat Gum's defensive traits and Gon's offensive traits. And it could help Gon work more on his defense, alongside the fact that Fat Gum could be a punching bag for him essentially. I don't see any issues for the license exam either. Gon is powerful, he'd be good at rescue, and for both phases he should be able to hold his own. Definitely in the first phase he'll be fine fighting others. In the second phase, it really depends on how he acts. Like, it definitely wouldn't be a perfect score, but I think it would be good enough to pass. As for the work study, finding a hero that's right for him may be tough, because who could best refine his quirk? Well, once more, maybe Fat Gum again. And especially if he worked with Fat Gum before, they'd probably get along pretty well too.
That makes sense. Okay, cool.
For a motivation, it's pretty simple. His father is probably going to be a great hero in this verse as well. Is he a deadbeat in this verse too? Who knows?
I like that. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
Point being, Gon wants to get to his level. So his role model will just be Jean again. Pretty straightforward. Overall, I would think Gon has what it takes to be a hero. He would face some hurdles though. For one, his anger in some moments may cause him to act too rash. Also, when failing at something, it might be a major setback for him. Think of what happened to him like when Kite died. He'll often blame himself for things. On top of that, he'll have to learn to make tough choices sometimes. In Hunter x Hunter, we saw him deal with that same thing. And here, as a hero, it would be no different. Plus, another ability he might have is summoning all of his power at once, basically forcing himself to be at the peak of his power.
Why? Can't use Nen at chapter 1. And he's probably just learning to use this technique as he's going through the tests and that. I mean, potentially near the end, maybe. But,
Becoming adult Gon. This will only be used in moments of desperation because it could hospitalize him. But when
yeah.
using this, he has strength on par with the top pro heroes. Now on to Goku. We'll use a version of him before the 22nd World Tournament. So he's already seen some of the same character growth and definitely has a lot of the same techniques. His quirk is called Great Ape. Simply put, it gives him the powers of a giant ape. In a full moon, he actually transforms completely, losing control. But outside of this, normally he has a monkey tail.
Right, as a monkey tail and gains power through battle as his spirit flares up. He gets power boosts in forms of rage, and in the wake of a full moon, rage takes over his body to an uncontrollable degree. That's cool, and it fits within My Hero Academia's world. You got people that look like animals or different things in that, so fair enough. Doesn't look strange that he's got a tail.
And he has immense boosts in power from rage. In regular fights, his power grows as his battle spirit flares up.
And he also has Ultra Instinct and Instant Transmission and... Know what I mean? If Gon can have rock, paper, scissors with full Nen abilities, why is Goku not instant transmissioning and using Ultra Instinct?
Due to the physical nature of his quirk, he actually grew up learning martial arts. Plus, his tail could help him a ton here since it's an extra limb. It's not a strong tail like Odro's tail, for example.
I mean, that's a big tail.
And it's more like a weaker arm for him. And also, one downside of it is the fact that it's kind of a weak point. But still, it's an extra limb that he could utilize in multiple ways, which is great for martial arts and acrobatics. Also, becoming a helicopter.
Hell yeah.
His support item is Nyoibo, aka the Power Pole, a staff made of a durable but light alloy. It can quickly extend and retract.
Which is perfectly fine, because he has that from the beginning.
Of course, this has a limit to how far it can extend. But Goku's really good at utilizing it for fighting, and a staff that quickly changes sizes can really trip up some opponents. For stats, his power is 4 normally. In battle, it raises to 5. Also, while enraged. But when he becomes giant under a full moon, his power reaches a terrifying level of 6.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Cool.
The downside to this great power is the fact that he can't control it, and the fact that it only comes out in a full moon. But when he does use it, he's nigh unstoppable. For speed, he's at a 4. For technique, he's at a 6.
Why is he a 4 for speed? Alright.
Because he's a genius martial artist. For intelligence, he's at a 2. Not really exceptional, of course. And for cooperativeness, that's also at a 2. He often likes working alone, and will do his own thing a lot. As for the entrance exam, that's an easy pass. The written exam would be the biggest issue for him. But for the physical exam, he'd be perfectly fine. He probably wouldn't intentionally save anyone either. He would just rack up a bunch of points on his own.
Yeah,
for the sports festival, stats-wise, he could excel here. His issue would be actually cooperating during the cavalry battle, and this may cost him in the long run. For the obstacle run, he's going to be fine. But if he screws up the cavalry battle, that could hurt his chances of going further. But if he's in the tournament, he'd be perfectly fine there. He'd probably even win. He would just have to cooperate in the previous challenge. For an internship, he would definitely be sought after to some extent. He has great power and great technique. The biggest issue is the fact that he doesn't really cooperate with others too well, and he'd have to solve his other biggest issue, the fact that he doesn't really know what he wants to do as a hero. We'll get more into this later. To some extent, he might be a somewhat undesirable candidate because of this. His power is amazing, but he has way too much to work on. But thankfully, his charisma, power, and willingness to grow would give him at least something. Maybe he'd end up with a fellow martial artist like Gunhead. In the final exams, Goku likes to do his own thing. That's not to say he can't fight with others, but if you look at how he is in Dragon Ball, even nowadays, there are a lot of times where he just fights alone. And in moments when he does have to use teamwork, occasionally there are some roadblocks. For this part, there are a lot of variables. It might be tough to pass, and he might even fail. Unless by now he's learned to work with others really well, which is definitely a possibility. I feel like this would be more of an issue when he's starting out at UA. But still, it's something he
could learn along the way, yeah.
would need to work on. At least when he is fighting solo, he could hold his own really well. As for licensing, I think he'd be fine in the physical part of it, but he might fail at the rescue section of it. Again, it really depends how much he's developed by this point, which again we'll get into in a bit. For the work study, of course, he's going to work to improve his power and maybe even try and get control of Great Ape, which only comes out once in a blue moon. Or, I guess, once in a full moon. But also, maybe he could find a better way to control his anger, applying that to this power. Of course, Goku's rage influencing how he fights isn't this big of an aspect of the main story, but it's still there just enough that I think it's fair to apply it to his quirk here. And as you could probably tell by now, his quirk is kind of an amalgamation of things. Not just him, but even taking influence from Gohan and Vegeta. As a side note, Gohan would fit perfectly here. Like, he even already has a hero name, Great Saiyaman. Huh, someone should make a video about Gohan being in My Hero Academia. Real ones know what I'm referring to. As for his motivation, Goku in the main story is definitely not a hero. Well, in the original story at least. If you grew up with the original Funimation dub, it makes him sound way different. But he was never meant to be characterized as some sort of Superman-like figure. He does heroic things, but he's not a hero. It's a small but important distinction. His main motivation isn't to help people and be completely selfless. That's kind of just a side effect of what he does. He likes to push himself to his limits and have fun in fights. Here, he becomes a hero because it lets him actually use his quirk to its fullest, and it lets him push himself to become the strongest person in the world. Of course, this won't work in his favor. He needs to actually want to be a hero too. The biggest challenge for him will be learning responsibility and understanding what being a hero really entails. Unlike Giorno, and someone we'll cover later, I don't think he'd actively work outside of the realm of heroes either. He definitely wouldn't be a villain, and as for a vigilante, I guess he could fit in a role like that, but
Maybe.
going through the hero route, he gets much more experience and gets to actually train with the strongest.
Yeah, because he knows what's right and what's wrong.
I feel like he'd appreciate that aspect more. Because while he can just fight whoever he wants as a vigilante and doesn't really have to go by the rules, I feel it would be more fulfilling for him to be surrounded by exceptional people and join the hero course, even though it means more restrictions and less fighting on his own. He'd have to learn the same things that Bakugo realizes and eventually even Endeavor realizes. Becoming the strongest isn't just about physical power, especially in a world where they have to be heroes. So that's why Goku's in such a weird spot for me here, because I feel like the hero course would be the best for him, but at the same time it's not a perfect fit. He'd have to do a lot of soul searching and figure out what he specifically wants to do, and hopefully he'd eventually be molded into a hero. As for a mentor or role model, I'd assume someone like Master Roshi exists here and he'd be a mentor. If not Grandpa Gohan, someone who teaches him martial arts, and if Roshi's here, he probably has a quirk that gives him extended life. But as for a role model, it would probably be All Might. He's the strongest person around, and Goku aspires to be like that one day. Overall, Goku would definitely struggle a lot, not because of his power or technique, but because of his mindset. Would he even really want to be a hero? Since we're using an in-character Goku, I don't necessarily know. He's not a hero, he fights mostly for fun. There are heroic aspects to him, so maybe he can eventually become a real hero. A lot of his biggest obstacles would involve that. It's kind of like the things I covered about Endeavor and All Might in that video essay I made about writing the strongest archetype. I'll link it here if you want to check that out.
Good video.
Next, Ichigo. Just a quick side note, I only just started reading Bleach like a few weeks before
So that's fine. So you know what he's like at the beginning.
recording this, and yeah, I know, it's crazy. My friends have already made fun of me for it too. Same for the Naruto stuff, but at least I'm actually reading Bleach here.
That's shocking.
So a lot of what I'm saying is based off the first arc of it, and I do know about
Good.
some of the reveals later on in the story, but just keep that in mind. Especially after the thing with Yusuke in my Hunter exam video, yeah, I'm not surprised something like this is happening again. But if I miss anything, that's why. Although even though I'm not fully familiar with him or Bleach in general, it still definitely was worth it to include him here because his popularity. And in Chapter 1, he's exactly the age Deku was when he first enrolled at UA. So for multiple reasons, he fits perfectly in this video and deserves to be here. His quirk is Shinigami. This one's going to be kind of weird to fit as a quirk, but I think I have found a good workaround.
The ability to manipulate energy from his soul and turn it into power. This is a limit equal to his spiritual energy and can acquire and can conjure a tool using this quirk. Okay.
This quirk allows him to manipulate
Grammatically
energy
correct,
from his
but-
soul and turn it into power. He could train to get more spiritual energy too. As a downside to this quirk, there's a limit to how much he could use. Since it is being drawn from his soul, stamina is the big issue, and overuse could really harm him. He can use this in multiple ways, but usually he creates weapons with it, often fighting with a sword, although he has to kind of do this non-lethally as a hero. So even though he does fight with a sword normally, like that's his signature thing, just like with Asta, it's kind of weird to fit a sword in here. So maybe he would work with other weapons too.
Like a steel baseball bat. You know, something non-lethal.
Plus, he could also directly attack someone's soul with these powers, making him a really formidable opponent, especially if he applies these powers in other unique ways. He's not just limited to fighting with a sword. And he could use the same type of power to boost himself further. And as an awakening for this quirk, Bankai, obviously. I feel that's very fitting for a quirk awakening here. For power, we'll put him at a solid 5.
Okay.
Physically, he's already really powerful, and when he buffs himself with his quirk, it's even better. For speed, let's put him at a 3 or a 4. Nothing really crazy, but still notable at least. For technique,
Okay.
we'll give him a 4.
I say intelligence
He doesn't
3.
have full mastery of his quirk right away, and he does have some martial arts experience too, which is really helpful. But there is still room to grow. For intelligence, I think we could put him at a 4 because he's a pretty decent student already. Definitely
Alright.
not exceptional, but still above average, I'd say. For cooperativeness, usually he's a 2, but with friends he'd be a 4. It really all depends on who he's working with.
That's a weird one. You give him a 2, unless he's with... Right, okay, maybe...
Because he's normally more to himself early on, but alongside certain people he cooperates better. So if he's with people he's familiar with, yeah, he could do
Alright,
better.
alright.
I see no issue with the entrance exam.
Alright.
Assuming he's good enough with his quirk to make a strong sword, that would be really useful against robots, and this is one of the few cases where he could use a sword all out. He doesn't have to worry about being non-lethal here. Plus, he might even pick up points for rescue.
It'd be interesting to show that off as well, so initially where he can just slice up robots and just show how lethal he can be, and then the next bit is like he's having to step back, but people have seen it already. It makes him look even more impressive, holding back and still doing well. That's cool.
As a good student, the written portion won't be an issue either. For the sports festival, his personality and demeanor may throw off his reputation a bit, but he will be a very clearly powerful hero here. The obstacle run won't be an issue. Maybe the cavalry battle will be because he'll have to learn to cooperate with others, but unlike with Goku, I don't think this is going to be a huge issue, although he might get a bit hot-headed at some points. And if he does make it to the tournament, he could do well enough there, but I don't know if he'd really win, especially without full mastery of his quirk just yet. It all depends on how much he's adapted it to specific situations by now. For example, against someone like Bakugo, he'll need to use close quarters and ranged attacks, and depending on how much he's improved his quirk by this point, he might lack one or the other. And he'd also have to quickly adapt which weapon he uses if he manifests any. There's a lot of variables here in terms of how he'd perform in this part. So for an internship, finding a great internship may actually be an issue. It really all depends on his performance. We'll get back to this in the work study portion, specifically covering what heroes could help him. In the final exams I see no issues. I'd assume he has much better control of his quirk by now. He'll have way more ways to use it, and he'll know everyone well enough to work as a strong duo here. And again, he's a great student. And again, nothing crazy for licensing. I see no issues here for either of the phases that he's in. He'll definitely pass both. For the work study, maybe Endeavor would be a great option for him to work with. When it comes to his quirk, Endeavor is really smart, especially because it has downsides to it. Ichigo really needs to learn his limits and how to apply his power to its fullest.
I agree with this one, that's a very good choice.
Without also exceeding his limits and hurting himself in the process. Plus, Endeavor can maybe help him find other ways to apply it, so he has an even greater arsenal, but also doesn't get burnt out. It'll be a focus
Burnt out, see what he did there.
on variety and efficiency, as well as mastery. For motivation, I'd say his motivations in Bleach pretty much line up with what a pro hero in My Hero Academia needs to be like, protecting those around him. Straightforward, but powerful. And perfect for this. He also has to be willing to make tough choices. Like, this is set up right in Chapter 2 of Bleach. Like, what Rukia tells him is basically what he needs here too. He has to commit to saving everyone, not just when it's convenient. And he has to be willing to make sacrifices too, being completely selfless in the process. For a mentor or role model, again, I'm still not too familiar with Bleach since I'm only partway through, but feel free to suggest anything in the comments. As for a hero he could work with, Vlad King might be a good fit too, besides just Endeavor. In case you forget, Vlad King's quirk lets him manipulate blood. And obviously as Class 1B's teacher, it would be even better if he ends up in Class 1B. But I'm mentioning him because he's using parts of himself as part of his power, which is similar to Ichigo's power here. So in some aspects, their quirks have similar downsides, and he can learn to be more efficient with his energy. Next on to Edward Elric.
Ooh, okay.
His quirk is pretty straightforward. It's alchemy. He can manipulate the shape of matter as long as there's an equivalent exchange. Weirdly enough, like Giorno, his quirk is also somewhat similar to Overhaul. Of course, there are differences, but still, funny that there's another overlap here. And a pretty obvious support item, Automail. Assuming he actually has both his arms and legs here, these could just be external accessories that he manipulates, like armor that he wears on one arm and one leg.
I mean, it's pretty handy considering what the ability is as well. It just, yeah, it really does work as a great support mechanism.
Although, who knows? Maybe as a kid, he used his quirk in a reckless way, and he actually did lose an arm and a leg. In which case, it would be like the regular Automail.
Why not?
Actually, probably even better than Automail considering how futuristic My Hero Academia is.
Suppose, yeah.
Like in
An actual fully robotic armor.
the cold, it might not have the downsides of giving him frostbite. And it could have some other nice tech features too.
Alright.
For power, he's at a solid 3. For speed, also a solid 3. For technique, knowing how he is in his own series, he's definitely at a 6. He has complete mastery over his quirk already. For intelligence, he's a 5, maybe even a 6. And for cooperativeness, considering how stubborn he could be,
Yeah, I'd say that too. Yeah.
maybe he'll be at 2 starting out.
So, power and speed though for... yeah, it's fine.
In the entrance exam, his quirk is perfect for the physical part. Imagine how easily he could take down robots. And he could even take parts from them and turn them into weapons for himself and take down
Yeah.
other
Oh,
robots.
mate,
with.
that'd be sick.
The written part won't be an issue either. Pretty simple pass. For the sports festival, this is another place where he could really excel. In the run, his quirk could easily be used to get ahead of others and create other obstacles, also getting rid of obstacles for himself. This quirk would also be really insane for the cavalry battle. And even with his lack of cooperativeness, I feel like he'd get by here pretty well. In the tournament, he'd actually make it pretty far, but I feel like he'd be lacking physical power at the moment. Not that Edward's weak by any means, it's just that in his original story, he is obviously mostly known for his alchemy, not his physical power. But in the tournament, his quirk would definitely work really well for defense and offense, especially if he gets to use Automail to its fullest here, assuming it's approved. And this might be where he finds someone to take an internship under, because Cementos is there, and he'd be a perfect fit for Edward's mentor.
Yeah.
He needs to learn how to use his quirk without causing collateral damage. His quirk
Yeah.
is
That's a great shout. I love that.
really strong and even more versatile than Cementos, but at the cost of utilizing whatever's around him. It's really potent, but it's a double-edged sword. For the final exams, learning to cooperate might be an issue for him due to his stubbornness and the fact that he likes to do his own thing, but by this point it probably won't be an issue. And in the training locations, he'd probably be placed in one where he's in a fake city, because this would be tailored for the students. So they'd also have to make sure he doesn't cause collateral damage, or at least keeps it to a bare minimum. So on top of working with someone else and fighting a pro hero, he'd need to focus on that, and I feel like he could get through this here. For licensing, he'll probably be fine. For the work study, again, Cementos would be a good fit.
Yeah, definitely.
As for motivation, Edward grew up without a father. He disappeared, but apparently he has the same quirk as Edward. Same for his brother Alphonse too. As for his mother, she was killed by a villain. His brother's gonna follow in his footsteps one day too, especially considering the fact that they share the same quirk. I don't think he'd have any specific role model, but yeah, Cementos would be a perfect mentor for him. It's a pretty easy fit there. Next, Shigeo Kageyama. Mob is a unique case because I feel he wouldn't necessarily want to be a hero, but he definitely could become one.
It's his self-doubt and lack of confidence that's really gonna like mess him up here.
Originally in Mob Psycho, he felt lost and had to find his place. He never really did know what he wanted to do.
So I love Mob Psycho so much.
Plus, despite the great power he had, it was kind of an afterthought to him. He was always way too focused on his own shortcomings, and his regular life issues. He also didn't want it to fully define him. Maybe he ends up going to this school because his boss would recommend it. He has an after-school job, and apparently, his boss has a powerful quirk that lets him do things similar to Mob, but he never outright showcases it. It's Reigen Arataka. He claims he could have been a pro hero, but he didn't want it. Presumably, he even got a license at one point, but Mob doesn't know if any of this is true. Although, he takes interest in this and enrolls in UA, thanks to Reigen's influence. And he hopes by doing this he could find out what he wants to do and figure things out for himself. His quirk is pretty obvious. Esper.
The ability to manipulate the shape of matter as long as there is an equivalent that
It works exactly like it does normally. He has crazy psychic abilities. His quirk awakening is explosion. When he's over emotional,
I love how I spell equivalent wrong.
his power is completely
The equivalent.
uninhibited. And this is an awakening that he has even before entering UA, and it's particularly dangerous. He needs to learn how to control it, especially as a hero. Side note, Reigen's quirk would probably be something like coincidence. We could just as easily make him quirkless, but I think this one's kind of fitting. He actually does think he's quirkless, but this quirk is a really potent one. It lets things work in his favor all the time, just creating some crazy coincidences for him. He can't control this quirk at all, and he isn't even aware of it. He thinks he's quirkless, and he pretends he has a quirk, but he doesn't even know he actually does have a quirk.
Right.
Although, like I said, it's just as likely that he could be quirkless here. But still, it's pretty funny to give him a quirk like this, especially with how overpowered it could be. For Mob stats, his power is at a 1 normally, but at 5 when he's enhanced with his Esper ability.
Right, okay, cool.
And with explosion, we'll just put it at question mark. For speed, again it's 1 normally, but when enhanced with his quirk, it's at a 4. For technique, it's at a 6. From a young age he had mastery over his quirk, and he could even use it beyond what people assume are surface capabilities of his. He could do really crazy stuff with it. For intelligence, he's at a 3. He's an average student. For cooperativeness, let's also put that at a 6. It's pretty infectious, and he could always affect others around him too. In the entrance exam, I see no issue. His power is really effective here. And same for the sports festival, outside of the tournament at least. By now he's rarely ever used his power to fight, and he would have to get over that hurdle here. The obstacle run would probably be an issue for him. He's not very athletic to begin with, but he can rely on his quirk at least. The cavalry battle would be insanely easy for him. Besides him being really cooperative, his quirk is perfect for this. He can grab headbands from a distance, and he could even lift his entire team up and make them all float. It's perfect for offense and defense. Many heroes would take note of his power and want to mold it, even if he doesn't make it far in the tournament, or because he'd probably get there, but I doubt he'd go too far with it, especially if he's holding back against others. For an internship, he definitely needs to work on physical abilities. His quirk is great, but his strength? That's got to be the main focus.
Oh yeah, his strength ain't helping him with much at all.
Maybe Gunhead could help him the same way he helped Uraraka. Funny enough, his quirk shares some vague similarities with her too, just the floating aspect. But if Reigen is here and actually does have a license like he claims, yeah, maybe he'd go with Reigen instead. In the final exams, no question he'd pass. Same for licensing. For the work study, assuming he's allowed to do this, Gran Torino might be perfect for him. Similar to Deku and All Might, Mob has a lot of power he needs to fully control. He's already good, but in terms of how it interacts with his emotions, that's an issue. So it's kind of out of the league of what Gran Torino's already familiar with, but it at least has some vague similarities in terms of what he had to teach All Might and Deku. And also, once again, Reigen's obviously a perfect choice. He probably lucked out and got a license somehow, and Mob would be the only one working with him. But he'd definitely be helpful. If during any of these events he encounters something like Stain, that would be a huge issue. Of course, we aren't doing that here, but it's worth mentioning because that could cause a quirk explosion, especially in a case like that. For his motivation, he wants to open up more and find his place, as well as fully accepting himself. He actually never was sure of what he wanted to do after middle school, so that part of his character from the actual story could work here. And, once again, both as a mentor and role model, Reigen Arataka, a civilian and his boss. Next, Monkey D. Luffy.
Okay.
His quirk is rubber, or gum gum, or gomu gomu, whatever you want to call it. It's the same as his devil fruit. His body has the properties of rubber.
Also, he can swim. Why? Surely he should keep the weakness. Man.
And here, he could actually swim. Nothing prevents that. For a quirk awakening, he could turn other things into rubber. Since he has a multitude of abilities, just like other characters, we're going to have to exclude some stuff, like the whole Nika lore doesn't exist here, and his hockey abilities wouldn't be included either. Although, like I alluded to with Yuji, in My Hero Academia it's stated people can often discover that their quirks work differently than they first thought.
Okay.
So maybe Luffy would later on discover the fact that his quirk isn't just a rubber quirk, and it works like Gear 5th does. For power, he's at a 3. He could boost his attacks with rubber punches and such too. For speed, he's at a 4. This could also be boosted with rubber. For technique, he's at a 5. For intelligence, he's at a 2, and for cooperativeness, I'd say 4.
Definitely very cooperative.
Plus, he'd probably have other ways to use his quirk, like Gear 2nd and 3rd, although not 4th. But I don't see any reason to restrict the former two. And, like Giorno...
I do, because it doesn't start with them. It's first
he even entered this school. You know what role is perfect for him, though? Being a vigilante. So, no, he wouldn't be a pro hero. Could he be one? Yeah, I feel he could pass the curriculum, but he definitely wouldn't want to follow all the standards and regulations of being a licensed hero. The best part is, we don't need to make a hypothetical younger version of him to enter UA. Since he's a vigilante, he could just be as is. Everything is just based off how he was in the first arc. He'd have to avoid getting himself in trouble, while also being an unrestricted vigilante and fighting to move up as far as he can. His motivation is the fact that he wants to become the #1 hero, even with the fact that he's not licensed. It's a pretty straightforward motivation, just like he wants to become Pirate King. Although there's no One Piece for him to find here.
Oh my god, this image needs to be moved so you can read the text properly.
It's a pretty straightforward motivation for him. He definitely likes to do his own thing, and maybe he'd find some fellow vigilantes to work with along the way. I don't think he'd have a specific mentor here, but for a role model, definitely All Might, the #1 hero. And if Ace exists in this universe, he'd probably be another role model, and a fellow vigilante, obviously with a fire quirk. Surprisingly not related to the Todorokis though, or Luffy for that matter, at least by blood. So that's everyone I mentioned in the beginning.
Oh, but we got a special guest appearance, folks. Who is it?
But I actually have one more person to briefly cover.
Oh, Saitama. Oh, okay.
Saitama. So he wouldn't be going through the hero course because, well, knowing him, I feel like he'd go through the same arc he went through in One Punch Man. And hopefully he'd find some way to become an actual hero. The question is, how far would he make it as a pro? Well, he's a hero for fun at first, and he'd be doing this to find some sort of fulfillment. So pretty much like in his story, he'd be an official hero but stuck in a lower rank, trying to move his way up. His quirk is called Broken Limiter, which just gives him amazing physical power. For stats, he'd have a 6 for power, a 6 for speed, maybe a 3 or 4 for technique, probably a 2 or 3 for intelligence, and maybe a 2 for cooperativeness. He definitely wouldn't get the recognition he deserves, but he would also have great physical power. But there's one thing I didn't cover. What is everyone's hero name? These are names they'd give themselves and it should fit their quirks, but they can also base it off what other people call them. For Yuji, Tiger might fit because this is based on the nickname he had in high school because of his crazy strength, taken right from JJK. It also fits with the slashing aspect of his technique because Tiger Claws. I also did consider Eye of the Storm from Kenjaku, but that doesn't really fit much here, especially as a hero name. And any nickname from Sukuna also wouldn't fit either. They're not very heroic names. But who knows? Maybe he could even go by a name like the Cog to represent how he feels as a hero, if he ever reaches a point like he did in Shibuya. For Asa, this might sound uncreative, but his hero name could be Black Clover. I'd imagine his quirk would have some sort of black energy surrounding it. Or it could even be based on a name he had from one of the chapter titles, like The Flaw. Even though it has kind of a negative connotation, it fits with how his powers work. As in, his anti-quirk is the World's Flaw. For Giorno, he's not a hero, so no hero name. He definitely would have his normal nickname, Gio Gio, aka Jojo. He doesn't really need a code name though, and maybe it's just something simple like that. For Gon, this one's a bit tough since he never got a true nickname, so as a hero he could be something simple like Hunter, based on his survival skills, or we could also name him something like The Light. The latter is based on the fact that he's always compared to light, mainly Killua saying Gon is light itself. In verse, an explanation would be that his quirk generates a powerful light, so it's a simple name fitting for a simple enhancer. It fits on multiple levels. Goku's name could also be simple and fit his quirk. Uzaru or Great Ape. Using the name Kakarot wouldn't make much sense because it's not an actual
Great
word,
Ape
like I
is
guess
a
you
good
could say
name.
because his outfit's orange. People would say it
Very
looks like a carrot,
superhero-esque.
but that's kind of a stretch. Another fitting name would be Monkey King, as a name for Sun Wukong and now for Goku. That also makes me wonder if he'd be taking Loud Cloud's place as the new Wukong guy. For Ichigo, Strawberry, or maybe even just go by his quirk name as Soul Reaper or Shinigami, whatever version of the name he doesn't use, even though they mean the same thing. For Edward Elric, it's a simple name, the Full Metal Alchemist, or Full Metal for short. For Shigeo Kageyama, it would just be Mob. It's a familiar nickname for him, and he'd probably just want to go by this. For Luffy, also a pretty simple nickname, his vigilante name would be Straw Hat. For Saitama, Caped Baldy was chosen for him, not by him, so knowing his luck, it might end up as his name somehow, if he gets really unlucky. But the obvious hero name for him, if he's choosing it at least, would be One Punch Man. When looking further into each character's motivations and backstory, you could see that it's not really straightforward, especially when some of these characters have multiple powers, like Yuji's blood manipulation and soul attacks, or Luffy's hockey and all the Nika stuff, or Goku being a literal alien, he's not even human. But the most important thing here is considering their mindsets. Some characters simply aren't suited to be heroes, like Giorno or Luffy. Not that they can't be heroes, just that they definitely find other avenues. This isn't a really fitting path for them. Some, like Yuji, may not be a traditional hero in their own series, but definitely have the traits that align with that of a hero, and they could apply that to this world. Others, like Goku, might struggle with finding what they want. Maybe his heart isn't fully in it for the heroics, even with his physical stats fitting perfectly. Again, there's more to it than just power. I have no doubt that all of these characters have the physical attributes needed to be a hero, with powerful quirks too to back that up. Plus, they all have some other great characteristics, like the desire to always improve and persevere. However, not all of them are innately heroic and fully selfless. That's something that they'd have to learn and adapt to, especially to be a fully effective hero. But let me know what you think below. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I'll probably make more like this. Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you're updated when that happens. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.
Cool video. I liked it. There was no reason why none of those characters couldn't pass the exam though, but yeah, interesting scenarios thrown in with how their abilities could be morphed into quirks and the said but he did say from the beginning, as they start in the series, and then with Gon it was like he's got rock, paper, scissors, and then it's like, oh, okay, man, I didn't agree with that. But fun video nonetheless. Can't remember what the next salad bar video is I wanted to check out. So I do have why simple power systems work so well as one that I want to check out, but I'm sure there was something else, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video, I want to be able to watch patron-only reactions, such as the original Dragon Ball series. Link in the description to the patron page. $1 a month is all I ask to help support the channel. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you for that, and thank you all for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. I'll see you guys next time.